Listen carefully, because what you're about to hear isn't for everyone. If this message found you, it means something inside your reality has already started to change, and you're not imagining it. Before we go deeper, take 2 seconds right now. Hit like, subscribe, and in the comments type, "I am the field." Not because I asked you to, but because your mind, your energy, your frequency needs a physical action to anchor what's about to activate inside you. Now stay with me, because this isn't just a video. This is a mirror, and it's about to show you something most people will never see. Something happened, not in your outer world, but within you. It was quiet, subtle, almost invisible. Maybe it happened while you were staring at the ceiling late at night, or in a moment when everything suddenly felt still. No dramatic event, no loud sign, just a shift deep inside your being. And since then, something has felt different. You've started noticing things you used to ignore. Conversations feel heavier. Certain people feel distant. Places that once felt familiar now feel like they don't belong to you anymore. And at the same time, there's this strange calm, like something inside you has stopped chasing, stopped forcing, stopped needing validation. That's not confusion. That's not burnout. That's not you losing yourself. That is your frequency reorganizing itself at a level your conscious mind is only beginning to understand. You see, most people go through life reacting, constantly adjusting themselves to fit into the noise around them. But something inside you refused. Even when it hurt, even when it felt like nothing was working, even when you questioned everything, you didn't collapse, you didn't fully give up, you stayed, you endured the silent seasons. The times when nothing made sense, when progress felt invisible, when you felt disconnected from everything and everyone. And that endurance, that quiet resilience, sent a signal. Not a signal your phone could pick up, not something visible to the physical world, but something far more precise. Your energy began to stabilize, to refine, to align. And in that process, your frequency crossed a threshold. A very specific threshold, one that most people never reach because they turn back the moment it gets uncomfortable. But you didn't, and that's when everything changed. Because the moment your frequency stabilized at that level, it became detectable, not by people, not by society, but by something far beyond that. Higher systems, higher intelligence, whatever you want to call it, became aware of you, not in a dramatic cinematic way, but in a precise, almost clinical recognition, like a signal being picked up on a radar that wasn't meant for noise, only clarity, and your frequency became clear. That's why things started shifting around you. That's why certain connections began to fall away. Not because you did something wrong, but because your field no longer matches the old patterns. You're not being rejected. You're becoming incompatible with what you used to tolerate. And that can feel lonely, confusing, even unsettling, because the world you knew starts to feel like it's dissolving, but the new one hasn't fully formed yet. That space, that in-between, is where most people panic. They rush back to what's familiar. They lower themselves just to feel comfortable again. But if you've made it this far, something tells me you didn't do that. You stayed in the unknown, and that is exactly what confirmed your readiness. Because the truth is, higher forces don't respond to words. They don't respond to surface-level intention. They respond to consistency of frequency, to stability under pressure, to alignment when no one is watching. And you proved something. You proved that you can hold your state even when nothing external supports it. And that changes how reality interacts with you. Because now, you're not just reacting to life anymore, you're influencing it. Subtly, quietly, but powerfully. You may have noticed it already, things aligning without effort, certain opportunities appearing out of nowhere, conversations shifting in your favor, moments where you just knew something before it happened. That's not luck, that's not coincidence, that's coherence. Your field is becoming ordered, precise, intentional. And when that happens, reality starts to organize itself around you. But here's the part most people won't tell you. This shift doesn't just attract support, it also triggers observation, because when a frequency becomes stable at a higher level, it stands out, and anything that stands out gets attention. Not all of that attention is comfortable. Not all of it feels positive. Because growth isn't just expansion, it's refinement. And refinement means pressure. You may feel tested, challenged in ways that don't make sense. Situations appearing that seem designed to pull you back into old reactions, old emotions, old patterns. That's not punishment. That's calibration. It's the system checking, confirming, ensuring that your new frequency is real, not temporary. And every time you choose differently, every time you respond with awareness instead of reaction, you lock it in deeper, you stabilize it further. You become less affected by external noise, less controlled by external validation, more yourself. And that's where it becomes unsettling. Not for you, but for anything that relied on your old version. Because the moment you stop reacting the way you used to, the moment you stop feeding certain dynamics, everything around you has to adjust. Some people won't understand it. Some will try to pull you back. Some will project, question, even doubt you. But that's not your responsibility to fix. Because this shift was never about them. It was about you remembering something you always had, but never fully accessed. Your ability to hold a state independent of circumstances, your ability to create from being, not from lack. And once that activates, you can't go back. You can pretend, you can try, but it won't feel the same because your system knows better now. It has experienced coherence. It has felt alignment. And once you feel that, everything else feels off. That's why you feel done with certain things. Not because you're tired, but because you've outgrown them at a fundamental level. And that's not loss. That's evolution. You're not losing your old life. You're shedding what no longer matches your signal. And what replaces it won't feel forced. It won't feel like a struggle. It will feel natural, effortless, like it was always meant to be there. But you have to trust the process, not blindly, but consciously. You have to trust what you're becoming, even when you don't fully understand it yet. Because this isn't a temporary phase. This is a permanent shift in how your energy interacts with reality. You're moving from seeking to being, from chasing to allowing, from reacting to creating. And that transition is the most powerful moment in any human experience. Most people talk about manifestation like it's about getting things, attracting outcomes, controlling reality. But real manifestation starts when you no longer need to control anything. When your internal state becomes so stable, so aligned, that reality has no choice but to reflect it. And that's where you are now, not fully there yet, but stepping into it, feeling it, recognizing it. And yes, it can feel unsettling because it's unfamiliar. Because it challenges everything you thought you knew about yourself, about life, about how things work. But that discomfort is a sign you're expanding, that you're moving beyond the limits you used to live in. So don't fight it. Don't question it too much. Just observe, feel, stay present. Because the more you resist, the more unstable it feels. But the more you allow, the clearer it becomes. You'll start to see patterns, connections, synchronicities that weren't visible before. You'll start to feel guided, not by external voices, but by something deeper, quieter, more precise. Your intuition won't feel like a guess anymore. It will feel like knowing. And that knowing is your new baseline. The more you trust it, the stronger it becomes. The more you act from it, the more reality aligns with it. Until eventually, there's no separation between what you feel internally and what you experience externally. That's coherence. That's alignment. That's what most people spend their entire lives trying to reach without realizing it starts from within. And you have already crossed the threshold. You've already initiated the shift. Now it's about stabilizing it, integrating it, living from it. Not perfectly, not all at once, but consistently, moment by moment, choice by choice. And every time you choose awareness over reaction, presence over distraction, alignment over comfort, you strengthen your field. You make your signal clearer, stronger, more undeniable. And that's when everything changes, not instantly, not dramatically, but undeniably. Because reality can't ignore a stable frequency. It has to respond, it has to adjust, it has to match it. And when it does, you'll look back at this moment, this exact phase, and realize this was the turning point. This was when everything started to shift, quietly, invisibly, but permanently. And you didn't imagine it. You didn't force it. You became it. And now, something even deeper is happening. Something most people never become aware of, even if they spend their entire lives searching for answers. Because what you're experiencing right now isn't just a shift in how you feel. It's a shift in how reality is reading you. Let that sink in. For most of your life, your identity was built on reaction. You responded to circumstances, you adapted to environments, you shaped yourself based on what the world reflected back to you. If something went wrong, you adjusted. If something felt good, you chased it. Everything was external, everything was conditional. But now, something has reversed. And that reversal is subtle, but it's everything. Instead of reacting to reality, reality has started reacting to you, not in a loud, obvious way, but in patterns, in timing, in the way things either flow toward you or quietly fall away. You may have noticed it in small moments first. A situation that should have stressed you out didn't. A conversation that once would have triggered you just felt distant, almost irrelevant. Someone tried to pull you into drama, and you simply didn't engage the way you used to. And afterward, you realized something strange. It wasn't effort. You didn't force yourself to stay calm. You didn't try to be different. You just were. That's the signal. That's the shift stabilizing itself within you. Because when your frequency changes at a core level, your reactions don't need to be controlled anymore. They become naturally aligned. And this is exactly what higher systems observe. Not what you say, not what you intend, but what you consistently are. When no one is watching, when nothing is forcing you, when you're left alone with your own state, that's where your true frequency is measured. And yours has reached a level of consistency that's rare. But here's where things become more intense. Because once your frequency reaches that level, it doesn't just get recognized. It gets tested through contrast. You may have already felt this, situations appearing that feel almost designed to challenge your new state, old patterns trying to resurface, people from your past reappearing out of nowhere, emotions you thought you had already moved past, suddenly rising again. It can feel confusing, even frustrating, like you're being pulled backward just as you started moving forward. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is refinement. Think of it like this. When something becomes valuable, it gets refined, purified, strengthened. Not because it's weak, but because it's ready to become something more precise. And that's exactly what you are right now. You're not being pushed backward. You're being given opportunities to prove your new alignment under real conditions. Because it's easy to feel aligned when everything is calm, when nothing is triggering you, when life feels smooth. But true stability, real coherence, is measured in moments of pressure, in moments where the old version of you would have reacted instantly, emotionally, unconsciously. And now, you pause, not because you're trying to control yourself, but because something inside you has changed. There's space where there used to be impulse, there's awareness where there used to be reaction. And in that space, you choose differently. Maybe not perfectly every time, but enough to create a new pattern. And every time you do that, something locks in deeper, your field becomes more stable, your signal becomes clearer, and the system, whatever you want to call it, recognizes that. It registers that you're not just experiencing a temporary shift, you're embodying a new baseline. But here's the part that can feel unsettling, because as your frequency stabilizes, it naturally disrupts anything around you that isn't aligned with it. This doesn't happen because you're trying to change anything. It happens because coherence doesn't tolerate distortion. Think about it. When your energy was scattered, when you were reacting, chasing, adjusting, you could fit into almost any environment. You could tolerate inconsistency, misalignment, even things that didn't truly resonate with you. But now, that tolerance is fading. You start to feel it in your body first. A subtle discomfort in certain conversations, a sense of heaviness in certain environments, a quiet resistance to things you used to accept without question. And that's not negativity. That's clarity. Your system is becoming more precise, more selective, more aligned with what actually matches your frequency. And as that happens, some things will naturally fall away. Not because you're rejecting them, but because they can't hold the same space as your new state. And yes, that can feel lonely at times, because you're no longer fully connected to the old, but you're not completely anchored in the new yet. You're in between, and that in-between space is where most people lose their stability. They doubt themselves, they question the process, they try to go back to what feels familiar, even if it no longer fits. But if you're still here, still listening, it means you didn't fully collapse into that. Something in you held steady, even if you didn't understand it, even if you felt uncertain. You didn't completely abandon the shift. And that's what makes this different, because now, the system isn't just observing you, it's starting to respond more directly, not through obvious signs or dramatic events, but through alignment, through timing, through the way things begin to unfold with less resistance. You might notice that when you stay in your aligned state, things just work, not perfectly, but smoothly. Conversations flow, decisions feel clear, opportunities appear without force. And when you step out of alignment, when you go back into old patterns of overthinking, forcing, reacting, everything feels heavy again, delayed, confused. That's feedback. Immediate, precise feedback from the field itself, showing you what matches your frequency and what doesn't. And the more you pay attention to that feedback, the easier everything becomes. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become more aligned with how it actually works. You stop fighting against the current and start moving with it. And that's where your power really begins to expand. Because now, you're not just experiencing reality, you're influencing it through your state. Your presence alone starts to shift dynamics. People respond to you differently, even if they can't explain why. Situations adjust in subtle ways, creating space for you to move forward without resistance. And the more stable you become, the more noticeable this gets. But this is also where responsibility increases. Because once you're aware of your influence, you can't ignore it anymore. You can't go back to unconscious patterns and expect the same results. Your field is too strong now, too coherent. It amplifies everything. Your thoughts, your emotions, your intentions. They carry more weight, which means alignment becomes essential, not as a concept, but as a lived experience. You have to be honest with yourself about what you feel, about what you want, about what you're holding on to that no longer serves you. Because anything out of alignment becomes immediately visible. You feel it faster, you recognize it quicker. And that's not a problem, that's guidance. It's showing you exactly where to adjust, where to release, where to realign. And the more you follow that guidance, the more stable your field becomes. Until eventually, alignment isn't something you try to maintain, it's simply who you are. And from that place, manifestation changes completely. It's no longer about trying to attract things. It's about allowing what already matches you to come into your experience effortlessly, naturally, without force. Because your frequency does the work. It filters, it organizes, it attracts, it repels, all based on what you consistently hold within yourself. And this is where most people misunderstand the process. They think it's about thinking positive, visualizing outcomes, repeating affirmations, but those are surface-level tools. Real manifestation happens at the level of being, at the level of identity, at the level of frequency. And you are stepping into that level now. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to start seeing the difference, enough to feel the shift. And once you feel it, you can't unfeel it. You can't go back to pretending that your state doesn't matter, because now you know. It's everything. It's the foundation of your entire experience. And the more you stabilize it, the more everything aligns. But here's the truth most people aren't ready to hear. This level of awareness separates you, not in a way that makes you better than anyone, but in a way that makes your path different. You won't resonate with the same conversations. You won't be fulfilled by the same goals. You won't be able to ignore what you now feel so clearly, and that can create distance, not because you're pushing people away, but because your frequency no longer matches certain dynamics. And that's okay. It's not your job to force connection where alignment doesn't exist. Your only responsibility is to stay true to your state, to continue refining it, stabilizing it, living from it, and trust that what truly matches you will find its way into your experience, because it will. That's how this works, not through effort, but through coherence, not through control, but through alignment. And you're already in it, already moving through it, already becoming it, even if part of you still doubts it. Even if part of you still questions what's happening, the shift has already begun, and there's no going back to who you were before. Only forward, deeper into what you're becoming. And now, you've reached the part of the shift that very few people ever fully understand, because this is where everything becomes real, not theoretical, not something you watch or learn or try to apply, but something you live. This is where your frequency stops fluctuating and starts defining your reality with precision. Up until now, you've been transitioning, letting go, adjusting, becoming aware of patterns, releasing old identities, stepping out of unconscious reactions. But here, something locks in, something stabilizes in a way that changes how everything responds to you. And you might have already felt glimpses of this, moments where you realized you're no longer the same person who used to overthink everything, who used to chase validation, who used to feel pulled in 100 different directions. Now, there's a stillness, a grounded presence. Even when things around you are uncertain, even when life presents challenges, there's something inside you that doesn't collapse the way it used to. That's not detachment. That's not you becoming cold or disconnected. That's you becoming anchored. And that anchoring is what makes your frequency untouchable. Because once your state is no longer dependent on external conditions, nothing outside of you can control it anymore. And when that happens, reality itself starts reorganizing at a deeper level. You begin to notice that things don't just happen to you anymore. There's intention behind your experience. There's a sense that everything unfolding, even the uncomfortable parts, are serving a purpose. Not in a vague, abstract way, but in a precise, almost calculated alignment. Situations appear exactly when you're ready for them. People enter your life at the moment you can actually meet them from your current state, not your past identity. Opportunities don't feel forced or random. They feel like extensions of who you've become. And at the same time, anything that doesn't align with your frequency becomes impossible to hold on to. You can try, but it won't work the same way anymore. It will feel heavy, resistant, out of place, because your field has become too coherent to sustain distortion. And this is where the unsettling part truly reveals itself. Not because something is wrong, but because something is so right that it disrupts everything that was built on misalignment. You may look at parts of your life and realize they no longer fit, not because they were bad, but because they belong to a different version of you. And letting go of that can feel like losing something important, even if you know deep down it's necessary. Because growth at this level isn't about adding more, it's about becoming more precise, more aligned, more authentic to what you actually are, beyond conditioning, beyond expectation, beyond fear. And that level of honesty with yourself changes everything. You stop pretending, you stop forcing connections that don't feel right, you stop saying yes when your entire being is saying no, and instead, you start moving from a place of clarity. Quiet, grounded clarity that doesn't need validation, that doesn't need approval, that simply knows. And that knowing becomes your compass, not your thoughts, not your fears, not the opinions of others. Just that internal signal, steady, consistent, undeniable. And the more you follow it, the more everything aligns, not instantly, not perfectly, but in a way that feels natural, effortless, like you're finally moving with the current instead of against it. And this is where manifestation reaches its highest form, because now you're not trying to create outcomes, you're embodying the frequency that naturally produces them. You're not visualizing your future, you're becoming the version of yourself that already exists within it. And from that place, reality has no choice but to respond. But here's what makes this stage different, and why it can feel so intense at times. Because as your frequency becomes more stable, more coherent, it also becomes more powerful. And that means everything you hold within yourself amplifies faster. Your thoughts, your emotions, your intentions, they don't just stay internal anymore. They ripple outward into your experience with greater impact. Which is why alignment now is no longer optional. It's essential. You can't afford to stay in states of doubt, fear, or inconsistency for long periods of time, not because you're being judged, but because your field will reflect it back to you almost immediately. And that reflection can feel confronting, because there's no more delay, no more buffering. What you hold is what you experience. And that level of immediacy requires awareness. It requires presence. It requires you to take full responsibility for your state. Not in a heavy or overwhelming way, but in a conscious, empowered way. You begin to realize that you're not a victim of your circumstances. You're a participant in their creation. Not through force, not through control, but through alignment, through the consistency of your frequency. And once that realization fully integrates, everything changes. You stop waiting. You stop hoping. You stop looking outside of yourself for answers. Because you understand the source of everything you experience is within you. And that doesn't isolate you. It empowers you. It frees you from dependency. It frees you from needing external validation to feel complete. It frees you from chasing things that were never truly aligned with you in the first place. And from that freedom, something new emerges. A deeper sense of purpose. Not the kind that comes from trying to figure out your life, but the kind that comes from simply being who you are, fully, authentically, without compromise. And that purpose doesn't feel like pressure. It feels like flow. It feels like clarity. It feels like everything you do naturally aligns with something greater than just survival or success. You start to see how your presence, your energy, your way of being impacts the people around you, without you trying, without you forcing anything. Just by existing in your aligned state, you shift the environment. You create space for others to feel something different, to see something different, to recognize something within themselves. And that is where your influence expands beyond your personal experience, not because you're trying to change the world, but because your alignment naturally does, quietly, subtly, powerfully. And this is why higher forces, higher systems, whatever you want to call them, respond the way they do. Not with interference, not with control, but with alignment. They don't need to guide you directly because your frequency now aligns you with what you need. They don't need to intervene because your state organizes your path. Everything becomes self-regulating, self-correcting, self-aligning, as long as you stay true to your frequency. And that's the only real requirement. Not perfection, not constant positivity, just honesty, just awareness, just alignment. And when you drift, because you will at times, the system doesn't punish you. It simply reflects it, shows you clearly where you've stepped out of alignment, and gives you the opportunity to return, to recalibrate, to stabilize again. And each time you do that, your baseline strengthens, your awareness deepens, your alignment becomes more natural, until eventually, it's no longer something you think about. It's just who you are. And from that place, everything changes in a way that doesn't need to be explained, because it's experienced. You feel it in the way you move through your day, in the way you respond to situations, in the way you interact with people. There's a quiet confidence, not loud, not forced, but steady, grounded, real. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to convince anyone. You simply exist in your state, and that's enough, more than enough. because your frequency speaks louder than words ever could. It communicates something that can't be faked, can't be forced, can only be embodied. And that embodiment is what you've been moving toward this entire time. Not realizing it, not fully understanding it, but feeling it, step by step, moment by moment, choice by choice. And now, you're here, not at the end, but at a new beginning, a new baseline, a new way of experiencing reality, one where you're no longer searching for answers, because you've become the answer, not in a way that makes you separate from others, but in a way that allows you to exist fully within yourself, without needing anything outside of you to complete that. And from that place, everything else becomes an extension, not a requirement, not a dependency, just an addition to what already exists within you. And that's the shift. That's the transformation. That's the moment where everything changes, quietly, permanently, undeniably. So if you've made it this far, if something inside you recognizes these words, if you feel that subtle resonance that can't quite be explained, then you already know this isn't something you need to chase. It's something you've already stepped into. And all that's left is to continue, to trust it, to live it, to embody it, fully, completely, without hesitation. Because the moment you do, the moment you stop doubting and start being, everything aligns in ways that will make your past self unrecognizable. And you'll realize, this wasn't something that happened to you. This was something that awakened within you, something that was always there, waiting for the moment you were ready to see it, to feel it, to become it. And now, you are